They were lost in their memories as they looked at each other's faces. Deculein, looking away, thought, "I'm having all kinds of thoughts over a game character." Ria also looked away, thinking, "Get a grip. Focus. That's just Deculein." Ganesha was stunned as she watched Deculein scold the students from a distance. He warned them that carrying food around and dropping it on the road would result in penalty points. Ganesha thought, "He definitely saw me but didn't say anything. Has he really changed? That Deculein..." A few days later, inside the car, Deculein told Yeriel to calm down and stop shaking like a wet dog. She protested that they were on their way to see the new emperor, and that he was the strange one for remaining so calm. He explained that at the coronation they would simply bow their heads, as it was not even a formal audience, so there was no need to fuss. He then handed her a stack of papers, his predictions based on analysing the next emperor's tendencies and conditions, and instructed her to use them when managing the territory. Yeriel reacted with disbelief, calling him some kind of prophet and telling him to stop pretending to be a genius. Deculein replied that he would be watching to see if she followed the instructions properly. Yeriel sighed. Deculein thought, 12 days ago, the former Emperor Kribaum finally died. Once the new emperor is crowned, the main quest will accelerate. So I organised the major events I know into a document. If Yeriel just follows this, the difficulty of future quests can be greatly reduced. At the coronation, the guard directed the members of House Deculein to proceed to their designated spot. Yeriel glanced around as they walked, noting how many people had already gathered. Deculein's eyes met Yulia's for a brief second. She bowed. He returned the gesture. Deculein thought, is she still having trouble regarding Veron? A hush fell over the plaza. The sound of carriage wheels rolling to a stop on the red carpet made every head turn. Before the door even opened, thousands of nobles lowered their heads in perfect silence. The door swung wide. A single slender boot touched the crimson carpet, then the rest. As she walked on the carpet leading up to the throne platform, a priest stepped forward and placed the golden crown upon her head. Drums roared one after another, the thunderous beats rolling across the plaza like a war anthem. The crowd erupted in cheers. And thus, a new emperor was born. Emperor Sophian Eketer August von Giefrain. She yawned. Yeriel's eyes widened beside Deculein as she remarked that the emperor had yawned. The new emperor, Sophian, had claimed the highest throne in the land, yet boredom clung to her like a second skin. She possessed talents so absurdly perfect that nothing in this world could ever truly excite her. Knighthood? She would have become a guardian knight. Magic? An archmage in a single year. Every path lay open to her, and precisely for that reason, every path felt empty. Of course, there is an even bigger reason. Deculein suddenly felt a gaze burning into him. Deculein thought, what? Who on earth is looking at me? I feel a gaze. He lifted his eyes. It was none other than the Emperor herself. He quietly lowered his head again. Yeriel whispered that His Majesty was scanning the nobles and had been staring in their direction for quite a while. Deculein thought, no, she's definitely looking at me right now. But why with that kind of expression? As the coronation ended, the Emperor returned to her place. As she sat on the throne, idly twiddling a king's chess piece between her fingers, Sophian said, it was an extremely boring ceremony. I expected at least a bombing or an attack. Beside her stood Karen, her guardian knight. Still, she continued with a small smile, there was one interesting fellow. That thing you gave me before. You told me to try it, remember? You said it was causing a public uproar even though it was just a test from the mage tower. I saw its creator, so I simply looked at him. At first, but he looked as if he knew me. Karen raised an eyebrow. Who wouldn't know your majesty? Sophian replied, no, he was different. I can't quite explain it, but he was clearly sizing me up inside, and even after noticing my gaze, his eyes didn't waver at all. That amused me. It felt like meeting someone of my own kind after a long time. Karen simply nodded. I see. Sophian continued, now that I'm emperor, I suppose I should do my duties. I'll start with the long-standing unwritten rule. She grinned. Yes, I'm talking about the emperor's tutor. At the academy, Deculein headed toward his office with his assistant Alan. He remarked that even with a new term, the students' stupidity had not changed at all. Alan laughed and said the debutantes would adapt little by little. As they approached the office, a crowd of students had gathered. Alan wondered why so many people were waiting in front of the professor's office, but Deculein simply replied that he had no idea. As Deculein entered his office, Imperial guards were waiting inside. Noticing the Imperial crest, Deculein wondered why the Imperial court would seek him out. Chiron unfolded the imperial scroll and declared, Deculein von Greyen Euclein, a letter from the imperial court. Receive it with proper respect. Deculein and Alan bowed. Karen read aloud, the imperial court grants Deculein, head professor of the Imperial Mage Tower and lord of the Euclein clan, the honour of conversing with His Majesty on magical knowledge. Deculein has been selected as a candidate for the tutoring mage, who will teach magic to His Majesty. Solve the problem prepared by court mage Georg to prove your ability. Deculein internally sweated, wondering how and why the Emperor had chosen him. In the Empire, there was a long-standing tradition. For 1 full year after enthronement, the Emperor must learn from the world itself. Knights, mages and scholars, each selected through brutal examinations, would take turns as instructors. Karen stood before Deculein's desk, imperial scroll unrolled, and informed him that Professor Deculein von Greyen Euclein had been included as a candidate for the position of instructional mage to tutor Her Majesty the Emperor. To prove his worth, he must solve the test question prepared by the palace mage George. Deculein's mind raced. The Emperor chose me? That's never happened to Deculein in the original story. My interest is piqued. Normally I wouldn't bother, but when an event like this drops straight into my lap, there's no reason to refuse. Quests tied to the Imperial family always come with outrageous rewards. On top of that, I might finally figure out why Sophien has had her eye on me. Karen asked formally whether he would accept the challenge. If he felt his skills were insufficient, he could forfeit. Deculein answered without hesitation. I shall accept. Karen handed over a single sheet of paper and turned toward the door, stating that was all. Karen thought, it's a problem. His Excellency Lord George declared it difficult and that it would torment even the greatest minds for at least 1 day, perhaps 3. Let's see how long the much-rumoured Deculein will take. 5 minutes later. The door burst open almost instantly. The knights stationed outside rushed in, eyes wide. Before they could even speak, a calm, resonant voice issued from the sheet itself. Congratulations, mage. I am George, mage of the Imperial Court. I will judge your ability solely by the time it took you to solve the problem. Even completing it within a single day would be considered remarkably fast. The knight in shock, exclaiming that he had already finished. Deculein lowered the paper down calmly and said, yes, it was far from easy. I was only able to solve it because I've been deeply researching rune language lately. I was simply fortunate. The knights erupted in stunned praise, but inside, Deculein thought, the rune language within the problem, it may be ancient and obscure to everyone else, but not to me. I was the one who refined this exact rune font back when I was a game designer. That memory, combined with my skilled comprehension, made a problem of this level trivial. Karen stepped forward and offered a sealed letter, declaring it an official invitation from the Imperial family. Deculein had passed the examination. Deculein accepted it with a small nod and thanked him. Later, in the Imperial office, Karen stood at attention and reported on the event. He solved it in 5 minutes, Sophien questions. Karen nodded. Then there is nothing left to discuss, Sophien said. Karen bowed. Still, perhaps we should observe a little longer. What more is there to observe? Sophien cut in, voice flat. He solved a problem Lord George swore was nearly impossible in 5 minutes. That is more than enough proof. She sighed, clearly unhappy. Well, you did favour Mage Luina over Deculein from the start. That mage took 4 full hours. Under normal circumstances, 4 hours would have been considered outstanding, but the difference is now undeniable. Karen remained respectful. Your Majesty, my preference for Luina is not personal bias. Professor Deculein is surrounded by far too many troubling rumours. A flawless mage would be far more suitable for the Imperial Palace. She sighs. Her gaze sharpened. Do not speak to me of rumours. I trust only what I see with my own eyes. I have decided. The instructional mage will be Deculein. Do not press the matter further. Karen exhaled slowly. Understood. Sophien yawned again. Come to think of it, the original examiner for the instructional knight selection was injured, wasn't he? Yes. Vice Captain Isaac of the Freeheim Knight Order is currently on medical leave. Sophia, leaning on her hand, said, that is why there has been no news about the knight examinations. Are there any other suitable candidates? We are still searching. Sophien's lips curved into a small mischievous smile. A suitable candidate. She tapped the chess piece once. I have a good idea. She looked at Karen. Carry out my orders at once. Karen's expression turned concerned, but he bowed and left. The Freeheim Knight Order training grounds, Julie swung her sword in relentless arcs while her followers watched from the side. They muttered that the commander was pushing herself too hard, that her complexion still looked terrible, and that at least she could hold a sword now. Before, they had feared she would collapse on the spot. The only thing that could restore Captain Julie's spirit right now was probably news that Veron's body had been found. But since it had fallen from a cliff, the search was nearly impossible. A knight came sprinting across the field. "Captain?" He skidded to a stop, breathless, and announced that an Imperial knight had come. Chiron stepped forward and informed Julie von Deerfraden that she was granted the honour of conversing with and crossing swords before Her Majesty the Emperor. She had been selected as a candidate for the position of Instructional Knight, tasked with teaching Her Majesty swordsmanship, pass the examination, and prove her worth. Julie's eyes lit up with pure excitement. Yes! There were several magical spaces scattered across the continent, mystical, bizarre pockets where the laws of nature bent. Some were locked in eternal winter, others in endless night. Julie trudged through one such place now. Though the calendar said summer, perpetual snow blanketed everything. Her half-day march ended when a flash of light opened a path to a large wooden cottage nestled in the blizzard. She pushed open the door. Warmth rushed out, chasing away the biting cold. "It's been a while, Julie." Sirio looked up from the hearth with a lazy grin. Familiar faces filled the living room. Julie greeted them. "Long time no see, seniors." Sirio waved her in and said he had a feeling she would be one of the candidates. He told her to sit down and make herself comfortable, wondering aloud what the test would be like and noting that the gathering felt just like a group project from their academy days. Gwen crossed her arms, voice cool. "I don't know about that, but I won't go easy on anyone. Be prepared." Raphael simply nodded. "Obviously. We're all here for the same reason." Sirio glanced at the empty examiner's seat and remarked that they were a bit late. Gwen frowned and noted that she'd heard Vice Captain Isaac, who was supposed to oversee the exam, was still recovering from his injury, so she wondered who was coming in his place. Knock, knock. The door opened without waiting for an answer. A gust of blizzard rushed in. A tall figure in a long coat and fedora, face shadowed. Julie felt a strange sense of familiarity even before he removed the hat. The man stepped into the light. "Greetings. I am Deculein, acting examiner for the Instructional Knight selection." The other knights blinked in stunned silence. Julie's thoughts exploded. Deculein? A mage came to oversee a knight selection test. How? Why? What exactly are you plotting this time, Deculein? Raphael stared at Deculein in disbelief. "You? You're the selection officer?" Raphael, Sirio, Gwen, and Deculein had been schoolmates who joined the Knights Department and the Magic Department in the same year. Raphael shot to his feet, his nearly 2-meter frame towering over everyone as his manly features twisted in outrage. "What do you know about swords? No, do you even know what knights do? How dare..." Deculein walked past them without a word and took the elevated seat of the selection officer. "Of course I'm a mage, not a knight," he replied evenly. "I will be conducting this evaluation strictly by the established guidelines. You seem displeased that I was appointed as the proctor, but as I've already been chosen as a royal tutor, I'm more than qualified. Surely you aren't questioning a task assigned to me by His Majesty?" Raphael's eyes widened in shock at the revelation that Deculein had already been selected as a royal tutor. Sirio grinned and remarked that the test had better be fair, warning that Deculein had better not play favourites. Julie remained silent, more uncomfortable than dissatisfied. Deculein continued, "I am merely the proctor. The actual decision rests with His Majesty. The test begins tomorrow, so everyone should get some rest today." The knights grumbled among themselves, but eventually filed out, still shooting suspicious looks over their shoulders. They muttered that they would rest up to stay in top shape and that the process still didn't feel fair, though they had nothing more to say since Her Majesty would decide anyway. Deculein thought, "They're right. This selection process hasn't been fair from the start, but not for the reasons they think. I am here to make sure Yeriel fails." Time passed. Clank, clank. The sounds of swords clashing and magic being cast echoed outside. Deculein went to the window and looked down at the knights sparring with one another. The Emperor's knighthood educator was a completely different position from a guardian knight. There was no relation between them except that both were knights. Why would a mage who knew nothing of swordsmanship accept such an absurd proposal to select knights? It was solely because of Yeriel. She mustn't set foot in the Imperial Palace yet, because that monster still waited in the palace basement, Deculein's death flag, the Freydon family's dark abyss, something Yeriel must never see. The mirror. Until that mirror is shattered, I will never let you reach the palace. He took a deep breath. In the morning, the candidates gathered at the dining table. Deculein announced that the first test would evaluate their observation skills and persistence. The testing ground contained many rare mana-born items. Each knight would be assigned one and tasked with retrieving it. He energized a crystal ball, and 4 items rose into the air. He added that the item must remain pristine, without even the slightest damage, and that he would not move a single step from his spot. Any objections had to be voiced now. There would be no second chance. Everyone, including Julie, shook their heads. Deculein declared the test begun. They had 24 hours. It was exactly 7 o'clock. The knights rose and immediately split up outside the cottage. Julie headed for the highlands where ice flowers grew. The snow from the previous night lay deep. Every step sank her legs to the knee, forcing her to bounce forward on her knees. Still, she pressed on until she reached the sheer cliff face. The ice flower she needed was a transparent bloom that grew only on high-altitude precipices. 10 of them opened and withered each day, so it was not impossible to find one. She scanned the cliffside and spotted it, bright, flawless, and perfectly transparent. A small smile broke across her face. Creak. She opened the door to their lodgings. Deculein waited in the living room. Julie approached and held out the ice flower. Here it is. He took the flower in silence and examined every petal and leaf with meticulous care. Julie waited without a word. It is defective, Deculein said at last. What? He pointed to a tiny nick on one leaf. I clearly stated it must be a pristine item without the slightest damage. Julie thought, that was careless of me. I should have checked it more closely before handing it over. Still, the standard felt impossibly high. I'll go back and get another one. An ice flower bloomed on a cliff. Julie grabbed the edge and pulled herself up, the cold wind whipping around her as her face turned pale from the chill. Found it. Thank goodness. Defective. It certainly hadn't been there the first time she saw it. Are there really this many defects? Sirio, who had already finished the exam, asked while he ate. Ariel's stomach growled. She was embarrassed. Deculein declared that no meals would be provided. Food would only be given once the task was completed or if someone forfeited. He asked if she wished to give up. Julie ignored her hunger. She went outside to search again. She started her 3rd climb. The blizzard was growing worse. Hunger restricted her magic, so she relied only on her armor to endure the cold. For nearly 6 hours, she scoured the entire area while the blizzard intensified. Snow coated her body and her hair froze solid. At last, she found another flower, ending her ordeal. She was exhausted and in no mood to celebrate. After returning to the cottage, she inspected the flower's condition right outside the door, then handed it to Deculein at once. Deculein examined it again. Her body trembled from the cold. Tension gripped her throat. Defective. No way. No way! Julie looked as if she was about to cry. Check for yourself. Deculein held out the flower. Julie took it and inspected it, spotting yet another tiny scar. Oh, what happened? She thought while grabbing her hair. It had clearly been flawless before she stepped inside the cottage. What kept damaging it? Tap! The wood in the fireplace crackled as the flames consumed it. At that moment, Julie's eyes widened. A realization flashed through her mind. One last time, I'll be back. Deculein looked confused. Julie went out immediately. Deculein thought, have you found a way, Uriel? Regardless, you still won't be passing this test. Gwen wondered if Julie would be able to pass. Sirio noted that time was almost up. Raphael simply hummed in thought. From outside the cottage, Julie shouted, Examiner, I've brought the ice flower. The 3 knights exclaimed that she was here. Deculein called out, Bring it inside, Julie. Julie pleaded. Please, come out. It won't be defective this time. She thought, I've been so foolish until now. I never realized the fireplace would damage the ice flower. But this is the answer. If I do it this way, surely. I refuse. Julie was shocked. Deculein reminded her that he had clearly stated he would not move a single step from his spot. He added that he had even given her the chance to raise an objection beforehand, and that failing to observe the conditions carefully was her own fault. Julie replied, That is indeed my fault. However, I will not give up here. She laid the ice flower on the suitable stretch of road surface, concentrated mana in her hand, and was shocked. A sudden burst caused a dull pain to shoot through her, but she didn't care. Clenching her teeth, she condensed the power in her palm and released it. Her magic rode the wind and wrapped around the entire cottage. The warmth of the fireplace vanished in an instant. Deculein thought. She enveloped the entire villa in mana, erasing every trace of warmth in an instant. Now, it should be done. Julie gave Deculein a dignified look. He appeared momentarily startled, then shook his head. It is defective. Julie looked down at the flower. Deculein explained that ice flowers were also affected by mana. Her efforts had been in vain. Ha ha. Julie forced a laugh as she held the broken flower. She closed her eyes and lowered her head. You fail, Julie. Julie collapsed onto the floor. Julie was placed in her bed, her body temperature dangerously low. The knights gathered in the living room. They asked whether Julie was asleep. The others replied that she'd fainted. Her temperature dropped too low, and she probably lacked even the strength to leave right now. They remarked that they had not expected this level of unfairness. It left a bad taste in their mouths. The others agreed. Deculein thought, I saw Julie's manner for the first time today, but there was something strange about it. What was that I saw with my vision earlier? Status effect. Mana damage. Julie's mana was crippled. Magic damage meant one's mana supply had defects, which wasn't that common. It certainly wouldn't be caused by ordinary damage. She must have suffered a nearly fatal injury at some point. However, Julie's injury is a setting even I am unaware of. Is she truly aiming for the pinnacle of knighthood while carrying such a status effect? Just what on earth happened? The knights continued complaining that the difficulty had been way too high, even for Julie, an ice flower and a fireplace. None of them had realised it either. They agreed that honestly no one could have passed that test. Since they were Deculein's peers and fellow knights, they might know something about the incident. Julie was injured once. Deculein uttered those words in a subtle tone like self-talk, deliberately testing the waters. The atmosphere inside the room changed at once. Zerio's eyes widened as he looked at Deculein. Injured? That was because of you. When we were on an escort mission in the past. Raphael patted his chin and became lost in thought, and asked if there were still lingering effects from that time. Deculein thought, what are they talking about? An escort mission? These are stories I know nothing about. Is this a setting from before the game started? Zerio asked Raphael whether he had noticed anything strange when he sparred with Julie. Raphael replied that it did seem like she was consciously restricting her mana usage. She used sword aura, but she didn't release her mana in a burst. Zerio nodded as if he understood and added that if she was still suffering from it, then it was a problem. She might face disapproval at Her Majesty's side, especially from the eunuchs, who are famous for their polarity. Gwen sharply glared at Deculein. Enough. Even if that's the case, this isn't how you should treat people. This kind of behaviour isn't cool at all. Even if she is injured, she can teach Her Majesty enough. You're overprotecting her. Gwen? What? She answered. Do you want to get eliminated too? Gwen shut her mouth. Deculein focused on his job as the selection officer and ordered, everyone, go back to your rooms. The second test will resume after the first dropout has departed. Julie stepped out of the cottage and sighed heavily. Deculein spoke from the doorway. It is unfortunate, Julie. She bowed. No, as you said, the situation itself was the test. It was my negligence. I should have checked it immediately upon receiving the task. Deculein remained silent for a moment, then asked, Julie, before I send you away, there is one thing I wish to ask. Julie hesitated. Is it regarding your duties as examiner, or is it a promise I broke in the past? Tell me again what that promise was. I simply wish to hear it from your own lips once more. Her eyebrows twitched. The promise had long been broken and Julie still detested him. Why had he stopped her just to say something like this? Or did he simply want to keep her in his sight for even a few seconds longer? Had he already become? Did he want to make excuses for Deculein? Julie began quietly. It has already been half a year. Where should I begin? Back then, I received a letter from the family of Luna. It was sent by the mother of a wizard who took his own life while under your command. The letter detailed the atrocities you had committed. It demanded an explanation from you as to the truth of the letter, but you burned it right there on the spot. That was the decisive factor leading to our annulment. Hyuga pleaded. You cannot annul the engagement. I will do whatever you say, so please forgive me, Julie continued. Only then did you promise to reveal the truth and apologize. But why do you ask that now, after all this time? At that time it was my Deculein's fault. However, that research is still ongoing. I am continuing the research that he started. Naturally, he'll be credited as a co-author of this research. Any profits will be distributed, and I will help his family restore their standing. On the day this research is published, I will also be able to apologize to him, Julie shouted. Why didn't you say this back then? If you had, surely... I'm sorry for that as well. It is just that I can offer no excuse other than that the man I was then is different from the man I am now. Julie was stunned by his words. Julie, Deculein looked at her directly. From now on, I will try not to love you. Her eyes and mouth opened wide. Let us go our separate ways now. I will strive to control my own heart as well, to ensure you feel no burden, and someday it will be so. Deculein. When he finished speaking, he turned around. You worked hard today. Please be careful on your way home. Julie watched his back retreat farther and farther away. Soon a small, sunlight-like smile spread across her lips. He was trying to change. She became aware of his efforts to do so. Maybe she had already known, but had simply refused to admit it. Feeling a part of her heart warm, Julie turned and walked in the opposite direction. "I will try not to love you," his words echoed in her ears.